Welcome to my podcast, From Illness to Awakening. I'm Allison Bruner. I'm a somatic psychotherapist and a shamanic energy healer, as well as someone who has coped with and overcome 8 years of chronic illness. I'm here to offer support to you on your path of spiritual expansion that can come from the experience of chronic illness. Today, I wanted to follow up on the last episode. First, I want to thank you all. I thought when I created the last video, I would just be a voice in the dark, maybe with 5 or 10 viewers. And I was surprised to see that there was quite a bit more than that. And on one hand, I'm surprised. On another, I'm not, because I know there are a lot of people out in the world who are suffering, who are challenged with the experience of chronic illness. And I just want to thank you for your patience, because one of the things that chronic illness taught me was to let go of perfectionism. And so the editing on the last video was very amateur. And I feel proud of myself today that I just remembered to hook up the microphone. But I will learn as I go. I will figure this out as I go. But I wanted to talk about, I received a question from 2 people. It was very similar, 2 questions that were very similar, and just address that. I was asked about awakening, spiritual awakening. And I was asked if that is what enlightenment is. And I'm here to assure you that it is not. It is not the same thing. I have one of my favorite teachers, or a couple of teachers, talk about phases of awakening or stages of awakening, and that there are several. I could be wrong, but my understanding is that there are some people on this planet that go through one big one. I was under the impression that had happened to Adyashanti, and as a result, that he was pretty much rendered unable to function physically. And I hope I have the story correct, but I believe that his wife was or is an acupuncturist, and it was the acupuncture that helped restore him back to physical health so that he could function once again. I'm not sure, but I think Eckhart Tolle also went through one giant enlightenment experience that was on the heels of very, very deep suicidal depression. And so that's another thing, is everyone's experience is unique, and you can experience a spiritual awakening on the heels of a dark night of the soul, or you can experience a huge awakening and then experience a dark night of the soul afterwards. And one could say that because there are stages of awakening, and there are several, it could be seen as, we're just constantly, especially in the times we're in, going through these different phases of birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. And so in these times we're in, we're sort of learning to not get too attached to the reality we're experiencing as we know it, and to learn how to sort of surf these waves in consciousness. So I wanted to talk about some of the things that can happen as a result of a larger awakening. And this is what I'm seeing a lot in clients that are approaching me today. This is the very type that I see the most, is there's this larger than ever before spiritual awakening, that where all of a sudden a person's whole entire sense of reality is changed, and the way that they know themselves even has changed. The way they see themselves has changed. So much so that they have lost interest entirely in the things that used to bring them pleasure, joy, excitement, or even interest. And it is absolutely normal. This is where people start to then think they're crazy and question their sanity. But um, they'll experience, and I experienced profound grief, and I didn't know why. But when I would think about myself in years prior, I would cry and feel as though I put that Allison to rest, that she had died. And it's a very strange experience. And when you're going through it, for me at least, I couldn't talk about that to anyone. I did try and tell a therapist about it, and she didn't know what to make of it. And by the way, I will say this too. Um, Psychotropic medication does not seem to work to help people who are undergoing the deep spiritual depression that can precede or follow a spiritual awakening. But also, what happened for me, and I see this in clients too, is there's a no longer an interest in the same kind of music or hobbies, or suddenly you don't want to spend any time with the friends that you used to spend time with. And there's this deep hunger for authenticity, and just a lack of energy to put forth a persona anymore. And it can feel like you're in this desert where you just don't know where to turn to experience any sort of joy or inspiration in life. And what that forced me to do was to leave behind the material world for a while and simply be in the now moment, in present time, in nature. Eventually, I started enjoying things I had never enjoyed before after living in a big city for 17 years, where it was all about a faster lifestyle, skyscrapers and dancing in clubs. Suddenly, all I wanted to do was just be still and quiet in the natural world. And for the first time in my life, I really enjoyed sitting for hours and watching and listening to birds, to birdsong, looking for chipmunks, waiting to spot deer became the most exciting thing. And beyond that, I really had no interest. I couldn't stand to participate in consumerism anymore. While I used to enjoy purchasing new clothing, suddenly all I wanted was to go to consignment shops and thrift stores. And yeah, and I cared less and less about impressing people. Another question that I received was, I wrote it down. Does this mean that we'll all have to go through this? And I knew where that question was coming from. I sensed it came from a place of fear and dread. And I want to say before the answer to that is I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that it's the same for everyone. I actually have met young people, very young people, who to me felt very, very light and so far ahead, if we're speaking in a linear fashion, so far ahead in consciousness that I sensed in observing them that their whole purpose in this life was to learn how to get their feet on the ground and function on this planet in energies that are far denser than they are, and just even figuring out what food to eat, because a lot of our food is quite can be quite dense, and a lot of it can be toxic. um i want to I want to assure you that through these particular 8 years that I'm talking about, there were a lot of moments of joy. I wasn't in an absolute state of hell and suffering the whole time. There was a lot of joy and a lot of love that sustained me. And I also want to encourage us all not to take on a belief that we have to go through hell to awaken. I had that belief, and the shamanic guide that I was working with in 2015 into 2016, she said to me, you know, because I was really, really suffering, and she said, you are not Jesus Christ. You don't have to suffer on a cross. And what was really sort of uncanny about that was she said this to me on Good Friday. And when she said that, I broke into laughter. And shortly after, the bells at a nearby church were ringing at 3 o'clock. If you're Christian or Catholic, you know the meaning of that. Um, and yeah, and so it's like all of a sudden the sun came out, and there were several more years ahead of me that I would navigate um, the physical issues, but I was still able to enjoy various aspects of life. Um, and while I acknowledge that my experience was quite challenging, I can see in retrospect that that was exactly what my soul had prescribed. There was so much that I got out of it. So, I, what I really want to impart today, with regard more specifically to physical illness, but also this can go with anything, is that what if, consider this, what if everything that's happening, all of the challenges, the pain, the the not feeling well, is, and I know this is coming from something that can sound trite at this point, but what if it is happening for you, not to you? I know there are a lot of people out there saying that, oh, everything happens for you, not to you. And that can be very irritating. But what if it's true? And what if you can kind of keep your eye on that through every experience, uncomfortable experience, and to know that you're not abandoned and that there's nothing to fear? What if you can make peace with all potential outcomes? I think I was saying in the last video that I did that I had to make peace with the potential outcome of being experiencing physical illness until my dying day. Because once you've made peace with that, you can let go. It's easier to let go and decide, I am going to experience joy and happiness regardless. It doesn't mean that you don't acknowledge the discomfort you experience when it arises. What's really foundational to healing is self-compassion. And that's kind of part of the illness journey, is cultivating deeper and deeper and deeper layers of self-love and compassion. Part of making peace with every potential outcome is to acknowledge the worst case is death. But is it? Because death is a moment, and it's a transition followed, again, even if we're leaving our physical body, it's followed by rebirth. Now, I have had mothers especially say to me, but that isn't the worst for me. I'm fine with death. But what about the children that I leave behind? And we have to remember that everybody has a spiritual team and are cared for. Part of overcoming physical illness is accepting that we cannot be there for everyone. We cannot take care of everyone. Once we've made peace with potential outcomes, and we don't spend too much time in this, we shift our focus to the present moment, or where we're wanting to go, what we're trying to create, which I'll get into in another video. We don't want to spend we don't want to put a lot of focus in negative potential outcomes, because then we're creating that. We want to just simply make peace with it and move on. One of the haunting thoughts that used to come to me often was, oh my God, what if I lose all ability to make a living? What if I lose my home? And so I spent, an hour making peace with that, and then I completely let it go. And when that thought would come back, I would just notice, okay, there's that thought, and I'm going to shift my attention away from it. Coming back to this idea that everything happens for us. I had such a fear of ending up in the hospital, and yet that's where I ended up 4 times. I had fears, because I didn't have health insurance, because I didn't want to feed into that system. It was also just completely unaffordable for me at the time. And so I ended up in the hospital. I also was afraid of having to deal with Western medicine practitioners who would scoff at me because I was taking a natural medicine route. So these are the things I actually did have to come face to face with. Another fear was of having to get a blood transfusion. It's exactly what happened. Um, but there were learning experiences through all of them. When I finally realized by the fourth hospitalization that I was not alone, that I had all of these beings that I was in touch with, that I was working with from the spirit realm, that I remembered they were all with me, and that I could ask them for help and know that every time I say a prayer, it is answered the moment it is spoken, even if it has to take some time for that to show up in my outer world. I trusted. The fourth hospitalization, I the, I had this big fear around getting a blood transfusion for many reasons I won't go into, but as I was receiving it, I blessed the blood. I thanked the person, wherever they were in the world or not in the world, for that blood donation. And they were actually thinking that I was going to need 3 pints. I ended up only needing 1 pint. I really, really believe that it's because I just kept blessing the blood. And I was so afraid of being dependent on the very people who in the past had criticized me for the lifestyle I had chosen, for not having health insurance. Um, and this time I was ready. I was more empowered. I was thinking of myself as not a victim, not seeing them as perpetrators, just seeing them as people having very just different perspectives, a different experience. And what happened as a result was, I was in this extremely exhausted and vulnerable state. They were really kind to me and offering to do little extra things like bringing me tea, um, reading to me. Someone offered to pray with me. It was sweet. Someone came in and just said, I imagine you feel very alone right now. And I noticed that you're reading, I can't even remember what book it was. It was a book by Matt Kahn. She said, I love that book. I thought maybe I'd sit with you and talk with you about what you love about this, or what you like about this book, or what you're learning in this book. So it was such a lovely healing experience when I became open to the possibility that maybe it wasn't me versus the world or me versus other humans, that maybe my spiritual team could be of assistance if I just remembered they were there and asked for their help. So in the days following that hospitalization, I realized it really was going to be the final one, because and realized that it had happened for me, because what was different was that time I was not trying so hard to control what occurred. I wasn't resisting or bracing against any potential negative outcome. I really was in a state of, okay, I have prayed to not end up here, but I'm here. So I'm trusting that there's a reason that I'm here. There's something about this experience that is really important to my journey. And so I'm just going to completely let go, and I'm going to bless this experience. And because of that, because I was able to let go and I wasn't holding so tightly, grasping and trying to control it all, my hands were open and I was able to receive kindness, gentleness, empathy, compassion. I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to allowing that. I was used to always managing and controlling everything and being there for other people. But this time I allowed something different to unfold. What also happened was pretty miraculous later. Um, I was told through, testing, imaging that I received in the hospital that I was going to have um, my uterus taken out, that there were cysts in there. And I just knew that some major lesson and was learned and some healing had occurred. And I worked with a practitioner and we were able to dissolve those cysts and heal my body. And I never lost an organ. I never had to go in and do that. So as I was packing a bag, preparing to go to the hospital that fourth time, I decided that I was not going to let fear get the best of me. I was not going to try to control the experience. I was not going to step into a story of, oh my God, my prayer about not having to go to the hospital was not answered. I'm abandoned. I'm all alone. I'm unloved. I decided to be in the story of I am not alone. I am loved. I have a whole team with me. And walked I drove and I walked into the hospital giving myself permission to feel the team of beings around me. Going into that hospital, I knew that I was not alone. I told my mind, you cannot fathom this experience, so I'm letting you off the hook, and I am going to give myself permission to feel intuitively the presence of my guides and helpers, my allies. So as my physical body would shake and tremble with fear because I was facing a trauma, I was releasing an old trauma around the need to control everything and feeling unsafe. Physical body was shaking. I was at peace in my center, which, and this is an experience that if you've been through trauma therapy, that's trauma discharge. So my physical body was discharging trauma, but I was centered. Believing that everything is happening for you becomes a whole lot easier when you know and can sense that you are not alone, that you have guides and other helpers that are already with you, or they're those of your choosing. And if you don't know who these beings are, start with yourself. If you don't already have a practice of connecting with your higher self, start one now. There is a you that exists outside of time and space, beyond your physical body, but also exists within your physical body, that is unconditionally loving and compassionate toward you. It is an aspect of the Creator, of God. Who better to talk to when you're feeling alone than this higher version of yourself? I used to spend about an hour each morning on my porch in the summertime or in the wintertime in my dining room, writing in my journal to and from me, the human, and my higher self. Now, I have worked with clients who say, I cannot even fathom that there is a version of me that is unconditionally loving and compassionate towards me. So to that, I say, either journal and interact with yourself in 5, 10, 20 years, a you who has healed from all of this and from self-criticism, self-loathing, a you who does have unconditional love and compassion towards yourself. Journal with that version of you, or journal with love, just love with a capital L. You start here and then start to branch out. As you do this more and more, you'll start to get a sense of what else exists in the spirit world. And I'm going to get into this further in future videos. But when you do this, after you journal or speak from your human self, you give your mind permission to not understand what's happening next. It cannot, because the language of the soul is not a language that the mind speaks. And so you either ask your mind to step aside or you drop it down into your heart, which brings about heart-mind coherence. You hold your mind in your heart very lovingly. You don't get into a war with it. You don't try to bypass it. You just lovingly hold it. And you write back to yourself from love with a capital L, from your higher self, your future self, your soul. You breathe into and out of your heart and let the messages back to your human self come right from here. And you practice this and you practice this every single day. And you start to get better and better and better at hearing your own voice, the voice of your soul. And as this relationship deepens, you begin to experience and feel more love, patience, compassion, empathy, and understanding with yourself. Your soul, your higher self, love with a capital L, does not criticize or judge you ever. It never speaks in ways that are fearful. It doesn't see the world in black and white, in good, bad, right, wrong, should, and shouldn't. As soon as those sorts of messages start to arise, just know that is your ego. Write to yourself from love. And stay tuned, because in my next video, I already have, and will be presenting to you an interview with Cindy Harrington. She's a nutrition response testing practitioner with whom I worked the final year of my healing. She's a super intelligent, highly effective practitioner of natural medicine, and it is my honor to introduce her to you. Meanwhile, I just want to wish you so much deep inner peace, self-love, compassion, and comfort. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for just seeing what my intention here is, to be in service, and despite my amateur YouTube video creation. And I'll be talking to you soon.